In Norway, steep mountains and narrow bays make travel a constant struggle. On one section of the west coast, that same wild landscape has turned the sea into a place even the most seasoned captains dread. So engineers chose a solution no one expected. Cut open a mountain, remove over 100 million cubic feet of rock, and send ships through a 1-mile tunnel inside it. Why take that risk? And what happens when the sea moves into the mountain? The most dangerous patch of sea in Norway. On the map, the Stad Peninsula looks like a small hook of land. In reality, it is a blunt wall of rock that sticks straight into the open ocean, with almost no chain of islands in front of it to calm the waves. The water around it is called Stad, and along Norway's long coastline it is known as the roughest and most exposed place to sail. To the south of Stad lies the North Sea. To the north lies the Norwegian Sea. Stad sits right on the line where the two meet. Under the surface, the seabed is uneven and fairly shallow compared with the deep fjords nearby. Above the surface, cliffs and hills force the wind to bend and speed up as it hits the land. All of that squeezes wind, waves, and currents into a tight corner. Weather records from the lighthouse and station at Krakenes, just south of Stad, show how extreme this area is. In a typical year, this area can have anywhere from about 45 to a little over 100 full storm days. That means long stretches where every second or third day is rough enough that captains have to think twice before they even start a trip. And when the wind finally calms down, the sea does not calm right away. Long lines of swell keep rolling in from the Atlantic for days, like aftershocks that will not stop. Those waves are not small. Norwegian coastal reports talk about extreme waves here that can reach close to 100 feet in height in the very worst weather. Most days are not that bad, but the real problem is how messy the waves are, not just how tall. Swell from the North Sea and swell from the Norwegian Sea come in from different angles. When they meet, they do not form one neat pattern. They cross and stack. Some waves cancel each other out and flatten. Others meet at just the wrong moment and suddenly stand much higher than the rest. The seabed makes this worse. When big waves move from deep water up onto shallower banks and ridges, they slow down and become steeper. One moment, a ship is riding up a long, steady slope of water. The next moment, a shorter, sharper wave lifts under the hull from the side. Sailors call this cross seas, waves that hit from more than one direction at once. Around Stad, that kind of confused sea is not rare. It is the normal background whenever the weather turns bad. Modern navigation tools help, but only up to a point. Ships around Stad use satellite navigation, electronic charts that show other vessels on a screen, and detailed wave and wind forecasts. What they cannot do is pick out the one stray wave that suddenly hits from the side a little harder than the rest. When long ocean swell comes from one direction, shorter wind waves from another, and there is hard rock on both sides, there is still a lot that no computer can predict. Smaller working boats feel this the most. Fishing boats, live fish carriers that move farmed salmon, and local freighters are often much shorter than big ocean ships. A long ship can stretch across several wave crests at once and keep more balance. A short one tends to climb each wave like a hill and then slide down the back. When cross seas hit these boats sideways, they roll fast. Crews walk on sloping floors for hours. Loose gear has to be tied down, or it starts sliding across decks and workspaces. For the people on board, Stadhavet is not just rough water. It is a place where you get tired, wet, and scared very quickly. Over time, this has left a grim record. Studies of this area mention dozens of ship accidents and near accidents, and around 33 people killed here since the end of World War II. That is a lot of lives lost on a stretch of water that is just one short section of a very long national route. These were not all old wooden boats from another age. Many were steel vessels with trained crews that still got caught in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The danger is not limited to big working ships. Along this part of Norway, many small communities sit right on the edge of the sea. They are tied together by ferries and coastal boats. People use them to get to school, to hospital visits, to work, and to bring goods in and out. When Stad turns wild, those routes shut down. People can be stuck on one side for several days. For them, this is not just a red patch on a weather map. It can decide whether a student makes it to an exam or a sick person reaches care in time. All of this happens in a country that leans hard on the sea for its income. Norway is one of the world's biggest seafood exporters. In a recent year, the country shipped close to 2.8 million tons of fish and other seafood worth many billions of dollars to well over 150 countries. That catch is first carried along the coast on ships that follow a sheltered chain of fjords and straits called the Inner Lead. This route is usually safer than the open ocean, but at Stad it suddenly meets a wide stretch of exposed sea. That makes Stad a tight choke point in the middle of one of Norway's main shipping lanes. The fear of this sea is not new. Long before radar and phone apps, people were already trying to dodge it. On a narrow strip of land called Dragsidet, which cuts across the Stad Peninsula, there are old stories that Vikings once dragged their long ships over land to avoid the worst water. Today, seafarers face a new kind of pressure on top of the old dangers. Storm paths in the North Atlantic are shifting as the climate warms, and many scientists expect stronger weather in northern waters in the years ahead. At the same time, people's view of acceptable risk has changed. A century ago, deaths at sea were often treated as part of the job. Now, every serious accident brings questions, public anger, and demands for action. Families no longer accept that loved ones should disappear in a danger zone everyone has known about and discussed for decades. Norwegian authorities and ship owners have tried to lower the risk in many ways. They have installed more weather and wave sensors along the coast. They have tightened rules on when ferries and cargo ships are allowed to sail in bad weather. They have pushed for better training, better safety drills, and better equipment on board. All of this helps, but none of those steps move the dangerous water somewhere else. Day after day, the same short stretch of sea keeps forcing the same hard choices. Sooner or later, someone was bound to ask a bigger question. If this short stretch of sea is going to stay wild no matter what, is there any way to take that dangerous passage off the surface and hide it inside a mountain instead? Cutting a mountain in half. How the Stad Ship Tunnel would actually be built. The Stad Ship Tunnel is the plan to cut through the narrowest part of the Stad Peninsula so that boats can slip inside the mountain, move in calm water, and come out on the other side without touching the open sea at all. The tunnel sits where the peninsula pinches in. One end meets the sheltered water of Moldefjorden on the south side, and the other end comes out near the Bay of Kjode on the north side. From portal to portal, it will be a little over 1 mile long, carved straight through solid bedrock. That rock is mostly very hard types like granite and gneiss, the same kind of stone used for heavy building blocks. That is good for long-term strength, but it also means you cannot simply scrape it away with soft tools. You have to crack it deliberately and control every break. On paper, the empty space inside the mountain looks like a tall stone hallway filled with seawater. The rock cavity is planned to be close to 160 feet from the floor to the arched roof, and a little under 120 feet wide between the main walls. Inside that space, engineers plan a sailing depth of about 40 feet of water. From the water surface up to the ceiling, there will be a clearance of a bit over 120 feet, enough for big coastal ferries, live fish carriers, and the well-known Hurtigruten coastal ships that work along Norway's shore. It is not meant for giant container ships that cross oceans, but for the workhorse vessels that live along the coast every day. To create that space, they have to remove an enormous amount of rock. Design documents talk about roughly 3 million cubic meters of solid rock being taken out of the mountain, which is about 106 million cubic feet. Once that rock is broken into smaller pieces, the pile grows to around 5.4 million cubic meters, or close to 190 million cubic feet of blasted stone. This is equal to about 750,000 truckloads of rock. Local roads are not built for that kind of heavy traffic, so a lot of the broken stone is planned to be moved by sea on barges instead of by road. The main way they will cut the tunnel is an old Norwegian favorite called drill and blast. Workers drill many holes into the rock face, load those holes with carefully measured explosives, fire the charges, and then scoop out the broken rock. This method is still used in hard mountain rock all over Norway because big tunnel boring machines struggle with very tough granite-type stone and changing rock layers. For Stad, the trick is not just to move forward. The cross-section is huge, so they are not making a small round tube like a road tunnel. They are carving a kind of underground canyon, high and wide enough to swallow a ship. Because of that size, they will not simply start at one end and dig straight through to the other in one go. Norwegian plans describe a top-down method. First, they open the mountain from above, digging a deep cut from the surface down to where the roof of the future tunnel will sit. That roof line is shaped and secured like the ceiling of a very wide cave. Only after the roof is stable do they begin to bench their way downward, one level at a time. Each new level is drilled, blasted, cleaned, and checked against the digital model, so the final shape stays within tight limits. This bench-by-bench approach matters because ships will not be moving through air, but through water that reacts to every bump. Big ledges or odd steps in the rock could make water flow unevenly, push currents into the wrong places, or even form standing waves in the tunnel. Project engineers and the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute have run models to find a smooth shape that keeps water behavior as calm and predictable as possible. So controlling the exact geometry is part of the safety system, not just an aesthetic choice. After each blast, crews have to make the rock safe. They scale the walls, which means knocking off any loose blocks with crowbars and machines. Then they drill holes and install rock bolts, which are long steel rods driven into the rock and anchored with cement to hold weaker pieces in place. In the most stressed or uneven areas, they spray on a layer of shotcrete, a type of concrete that is blown onto the rock with a hose so it sticks and hardens into a smooth shell. At the portals and a few key interior zones, they plan to go one step further and literally saw the rock. A tool called a diamond wire saw is used here. It is a loop of strong cable with tiny industrial diamonds fixed along it, drawn back and forth through the rock like a high-tech cheese wire. This lets builders shave the walls and edges down to very exact lines, especially near the entrances, where both the water flow and the visual impression matter most. The result is a clean, controlled edge rather than a jagged blast face. While all this heavy work goes on, the sea has to stay outside. The team will build solid rock walls or use cofferdams at each end of the tunnel. A cofferdam is basically a temporary dam made of rock, steel, or concrete that keeps water out of a work area that would normally be underwater. Together with leaving solid doorstop blocks of rock at the ends, these barriers keep the inside of the tunnel dry down to a level that will later sit well below the waterline. This dry phase is when all the hidden systems are installed. Once diggers have created the main rock cavity, crews come in with trucks, lifts, and scaffolding. They mount brackets for lights, lay cable trays along the walls, and run thick power and data cables that will later feed navigation lights, cameras, and sensors. Pump stations and drainage pipes are put in so that any seepage water has somewhere to go, and ventilation ducts are added to keep fresh air in the parts of the tunnel that will still need it after flooding, like service corridors and technical rooms. Only when the rock support, lining, and technical equipment are in place does the most symbolic step happen, letting the sea in. Engineers plan a slow, staged filling. Valves and inlets at both ends are opened in steps so seawater can creep into the tunnel from each side. As the water rises, sensors measure water level and pressure, and instruments track temperature differences between the tunnel water and the sea outside, because uneven temperatures can also create strange flows. The goal during this filling is to avoid sudden loads on the rock and the concrete lining. If the water level were allowed to jump too quickly at one end while the other end stayed dry, it could push sideways on the structure in ways the design was not meant to handle. By filling from both sides and pausing to let levels even out, the stress stays balanced. When the water inside the tunnel finally matches the sea level on both sides, and the measurements show calm conditions, workers can remove the last plugs and dams and open a continuous waterway through the mountain. Before larger ships ever enter, test runs are expected with smaller vessels and tugs to see how the water behaves in reality. These boats can check how much wake is created at different speeds, how easy it is to steer on the planned line, and whether spray and echo inside the tunnel match what computer models predicted. Results from earlier physical model tests with scale ships in water tanks have already been used to tune the tunnel cross-section and to set a reasonable speed limit of about 8 knots, which is roughly 9 miles per hour, so ships have control without throwing up large waves. The entrances themselves are being treated almost like buildings. The Norwegian architecture office, Snøhetta, known for the Oslo Opera House, won the job of shaping the portals. Instead of a smooth concrete arch, their design cuts the rock into broad stone steps that look like natural terraces. Each terrace is carved from the local rock, so the mouth of the tunnel feels like a clean slice through the mountain rather than a foreign structure. These terraces are not just for looks. They also help break up incoming waves and spread the force of storms before the water reaches the actual tunnel opening, which is key in a place where heavy swell is a normal part of life. Inside, the lighting is designed to guide rather than dazzle. Instead of harsh spotlights, plans show continuous lines of LED light running along the tunnel, giving captains a clear visual line to follow even in fog or spray. The light bands also help mark where the walls and ceiling are, so the space does not feel like an endless black tube. Along both sides, a guiding structure sits a few feet above the waterline, fitted with fenders. This is a long built-in bumper that keeps a ship's bridge wings from ever touching bare rock, and it doubles as an emergency walkway if people ever have to evacuate on foot. Higher up, near the roof, a narrow catwalk lets maintenance crews reach lights, sensors, and rock bolts without sending in large machines. All of this is overseen from land. A dedicated control room called a Vessel Traffic Service Center will sit near the tunnel and watch what happens inside. On the screens, operators see radar tracks, signals from automatic identification systems on ships, live feeds from cameras, and readings from weather and wave sensors near the portals. They can switch light patterns, close the entrance if something blocks the tunnel, and talk directly to captains by radio. The idea is that even though each ship sails under its own power, the tunnel itself is always under watch by people whose only job is to keep that rock corridor safe. Once that rock canyon is finished and the sea quietly fills it, the next question is how this hidden waterway will change everyday life along Norway's coast. The huge impact of Norway's new ship tunnel. Analyses in recent years have talked about roughly 12,000 vessel passages per year that could move into the mountain instead of going around the exposed headland. On a normal day, that means dozens of ships that no longer have to wait outside Stad watching the weather. On a busy day, the tunnel is planned to handle up to around 100 ships spread across the whole 24 hours, more like a steady highway than a narrow bottleneck. To keep that flow safe, the tunnel would not work like an open road where anyone can rush in whenever they like. It runs on a one-way system, controlled from a traffic center on shore. For part of the hour, all traffic would move in one direction, for example northbound. Then the direction switches and ships move southbound. Each vessel gets a time slot from the control room along with a target speed and an exact time when it should reach the entrance. Inside the tunnel, the spacing between ships is set by those simple rules. Operators can see every ship on radar, watch cameras at the entrances, and hold vessels back if something does not look right. This removes random meetings in the tightest part of the passage. Ships do not come around a bend and suddenly see another vessel right in front of them. Everyone knows who is inside, in what order, and when they will come out. The route itself also becomes shorter and cleaner. Sailing all the way around the Stad headland adds a long loop in open water. When you cut straight through the peninsula instead, the trip is several dozen miles shorter for many coastal routes, especially for ships that follow the old sheltered inner lead along the fjords and then have to swing out into the open sea only at Stad. At sea, every extra mile means more fuel, more time, and more chances for the weather to turn against you. Fuel is where the numbers become really striking. When a ship fights heavy seas, it has to push its bow up every wave and slam down the other side. Engines run harder, fuel burn jumps, and the vessel may still have to slow down for safety. In a calm, narrow waterway with little swell and a fixed, modest speed, the same ship can move using much less power. Simulation work done for the project compared the present outside route with a future route using the tunnel. For a smaller coastal freighter about 130 feet long, the modeled fuel use and climate emissions on the Stad leg dropped by up to 60%. For a larger ship close to 460 feet long, the reduction was about 30%. It is not just the smoother water inside the tunnel that makes this possible. The other big saving comes from cutting the idle time. When a ship has to sit at anchor burning fuel to keep generators and systems running, while the crew waits for a safe weather window, nothing useful is happening, but emissions still go into the air. Turning that dead time into a predictable trip through rock fits well with Norway's push to move more goods from road to sea while still cutting greenhouse gas output. For the fishing industry, the change is more than numbers on a chart. Leaders of the Norwegian Fishermen's Association have called the tunnel an important safety step for coastal crews and a way to protect both lives and catch quality. Fish carried in tanks lose value when bad weather forces long detours or days of waiting. A safer shortcut means more of that fish reaches buyers on time and in better condition. Coastal express boats and small freight ships that serve the villages around Stad would also gain a more reliable link to larger towns, which matters for school trips, medical visits, and jobs that depend on regular sea transport. Tourism stands to benefit in a different way. Western Norway already draws visitors who want to see steep cliffs, narrow fjords, and bold engineering projects set in wild landscapes. There are famous viewpoints looking out over the rough sea at Stad, beaches with bright sand and strong surf at places like Hoddevika and Ervika, and cliff routes where people climb with safety cables along the rock. The tunnel adds a new kind of sight to that list. Ships that seem to vanish into a mountain and come out on the other side. Plans for the project include a viewing point near one of the portals where a new access road would bring people close enough to watch traffic enter and leave the rock. Then there is the stone itself. In Norway, the millions of cubic feet of rock removed to make the tunnel are not seen as waste. From early on, Kystverket and the nearby municipalities have planned how to use much of it to reshape their coast in useful ways. One large plan in the town of Malloy calls for hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of free rock from the tunnel to build new land in the harbor. That fill would support a new central site with businesses, a hotel, and even a water park near the waterfront. Other proposed projects want tunnel rock to extend quays, create new industrial plots for fish processing and marine services, build small boat harbors, and even reclaim low coastal areas as farmland by filling old pits with clean material. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.